Okay, now I'm going to talk about Chan Heung's 10 rules. Reason I'm doing this is that they're not actually that widely known, even within the sort of wider Choy Lee Fut community. And I feel this is a real shame because Chan Heung did create our style, and it seems a bit sad if we don't consider properly the code of conduct that he laid down for those who practice it. Now there's some independent Choy Lee Fut websites across, that do display these rules, but not very many. There are a few slightly different versions going around. I think they kind of have slightly different translations. This is my favourite version. It's a bit more wordy, gives a bit more explanation, and there's a rule in it that I've not seen in any other versions. This is a slightly different version. I have that one on my desktop because it just looks nicer. This version, it's on a black background with red writing. I find that hard to read, it's not very easy on the eye, so this is the one I have on my desktop. Now, first of all, you've got to think, before we discuss this, why do we have rules? Why did Chan Heung create rules? A sort of code of conduct, as it were. The reason is that, we're learning potentially very damaging and lethal skills. This gives you quite a lot of power, and if you have to be careful how you use it, and you have to exercise judgment in how you use it. And a code of conduct gives a sort of baseline to work from. Just as an example, in the first form I learned this sequence of punches based on the left punch. And there's that one to the chest, that one to the throat, and then that one to the groin. So if I go like this, that's going to do someone some quite serious damage. If I just do that to my throat, just tapping, that's a little bit painful, really, not massively, but it is a bit painful. Do that, that's going to smash someone's windpipe. But even so you have to be careful. You don't necessarily have to strike that hard anyway, and I've seen this rule going around that you should always release great power when you strike, and that's not necessarily the case. In the 3 years since I've been learning martial arts, I have only very rarely needed to use anything that I've learned, and I've only used one move, and it's when I've been clubbing, and maybe a man, or in one case some women, got a little bit more touchy-feely than I was comfortable with, so I did turn around, elbow. Now, nothing more than a well-placed firm tap was really required. It's enough to make it clear that I'm capable of doing a lot more if they do more than I'm comfortable with. And they would back off. Now, I could have gone really, possibly knocked them over, seriously bruised their collarbone, whatever, but that wasn't necessary. It would have just started a fight, people with alcohol inside them in a club or whatever, and yeah, maybe I could have taken them, but then, they'd just be bouncers, and maybe I could take on 1 or 2 bouncers. But, that's just asking for police with tasers. And in one case, really all I need to do was in their direction. I didn't actually need to hit them. You just, because you don't want to start a fight, you don't want to escalate things, so you do not need to release great power every time. So, it's all, these things you do have to exercise reasonable level of judgment. The other thing is, you've got to remember that even if you don't use your physical skills, you have greater mental skill, basically. Those physical skills, the act of learning those physical skills gives you more confidence, and anyone who learns martial arts will say it's not just about the physical thing, you know, it leaks out into everyday life, all social situations. You know, if I'm cycling or whatever, I know I see things differently and I deal with people differently, and it makes it a lot easier for me to get what I want from people, and that gives me a level of power, and I have to be very careful how I use it, and you know, not to abuse it. So, you know, even if you never ever use your physical skills, you still need a code of conduct, because just by learning them, you are gaining mental power as well as physical power. Now, one thing I also want to say before I start on these rules is that you really should beware what I would call a sort of guru veneer. It's unfortunate, but there are many people in martial arts, and they get to the top, they can become very highly trained, who frankly are not that nice, and they really just come into it because they want to get the power, or maybe they didn't, and you know, when they started, maybe it wasn't about that, but then it sort of became about that because it wasn't properly checked or something, I don't know. But the fact is, there are some very highly trained martial artists out there, and they kind of and really all they're interested in is the power it gives them, and quite often they will cover it up with a sort of guru thing, and try and make out they've got access to greater wisdom, and that somehow they're morally better just because they are very highly skilled and highly trained and practice a lot and stuff. It doesn't necessarily work that way, unfortunately, and they do quite often, you can usually spot them really, because they do quite often come out with a lot of cliches and can be a bit contradictory. So you really, yeah, you do have to be careful about that. You know, you really want to be careful about what you take from a teacher, because unfortunately they're not all good, and they're not all going to teach you a decent morality, I'm afraid, to go with what everything else they're teaching you. Anyway, I'm going to discuss the rules now. I'm largely going to discuss them together. As I said, they are slightly different, so but I will make it clear that there are some differences. Anyone out there knows Mandarin or Cantonese or whatever it is and can translate it, that would be great. I personally don't. But anyway, these seem like reasonable rules, and they seem like a reasonable translation of what I would expect rules in martial arts to be for a code of conduct. Anyway, number one, the practitioners of Choy Lee Fut train and practice for the purpose of developing a strong and healthy foundation for their bodies. Therefore, the practitioner should keep practicing and never forsake its way. And on here, we've got practice Choy Lee Fut every day and do not forsake its way without reason. Now that's all quite reasonable. You know, you need to practice regularly to make sure you haven't forgotten your skills, and you know, and keep it all in here. Yeah, regular exercise is quite important. That's very well recognised, and you could end up forgetting the way if you don't keep practicing, whatever the way might be. Number two, with the high level of skill obtained in Kung Fu, a kind, gentle, good and patient heart must also be developed. This is similar to the Buddhist teachings. One also must never use his or her skills to commit injustice or injury to others, but only for the purpose of defending oneself. By committing injustice and injury to others, one goes against the rules and regulations of society and the government. And then on here, right, well that rule is split up into two on here. So number two here is, you should practice not only to improve your skill and body, but also to develop a good and patient heart. 3, never use your skills to commit injustice or injury to others. Now, yep, that's all very important. You must, you have to develop that kind of judgment, and that you have this power, and you have to be careful how you use it. So you need to be good and gentle and all of that. Now, I just want to say something about the bit about him saying going against the rules and regulations of society and the government. Chan Heung, I've not seen any indication at all that he was a government man. In fact, his most famous student, Heung was quite the revolutionary, and whatever other controversy about him, there's never been any indication that they fell out. They always had a good relationship by all accounts, so I suspect that he was pretty much with that sort of way of thinking. As a little aside, I have this theory. I have no idea if it's true or not. I just like it. That Heung was actually Chan Heung's sort of alternative identity, so that he could teach his style outside the Chan family. I mean, it was very common for martial arts to be kept within the family, and he may have wanted to be able to spread it further. The other thing is, you know, you're going to participate in revolutionary activities in repressive feudal China. It probably does help to have an alternative identity under which to operate. Anyway, number 3. Respect and obey all previous and older Choy Lee Fut practitioners, as they are your seniors. This reflects on your politeness and good heart. And here, pay your fellow classmates respect through trust, friendship and honesty. Do not bully them in any way. Now, oh no, that's wrong, sorry, it's because they divided them up. Number 4 is actually, you must pay utmost respect to your teachers and seniors. Now, I think on the whole that's a good idea. Unfortunately, as I've already mentioned, teachers these days, not always that great. So I would add a couple of caveats to this. You know, for example, if a teacher tells you to do something that goes against these rules, then you probably should disobey. You know, it's very, very unlikely that they're going to have a good reason for asking you to do something that breaks these rules. You know, if they ask you to aid and abet them in breaking the rules or support them or whatever, it's probably not a good idea. The second thing is, you know, if a teacher does break these rules and breaks them regularly and willfully, you know, 1 or 2 transgressions, you know, you should probably not worry too much about, but if they just do it over and over again, you know, maybe you should really consider whether or not you should obey them in general. I mean, I'm not saying just discount everything they say, but you've got to question everything else they say if they do break these rules. I mean, like, there's nowhere in these rules that Chan Heung mentions, you know, teachers should abide by these rules, but I think he probably assumes that they would, which is fair enough for him. But you know, I really should emphasise, I really don't think that any teacher, no matter how high ranking, no matter how many followers they have, they are not above these rules. Number 4 on this one. All fellow classmates are brothers and sisters in Choy Lee Fut and belong to the same generation. Act towards each other in a kind, gentle, faithful and reliable way, respecting each other through trust, friendship and honesty. Do not bully the weaker brother or sister in any way. And here, pay your fellow classmates respect through trust, friendship and honesty. Do not bully them in any way. Now this is really important because, you know, I mean, when I was actually in lessons, I did find it very difficult to learn a lot of the time, and to be honest, my teacher found it a bit difficult to teach me because I did have quite a lot of trouble with other students. Not all of them by any stretch, it was just a few, but it was enough to be quite disruptive. And you know, learning online has meant that I've been able to learn as quickly as I want, train as much as I want, without worrying about what anybody else is thinking, and apart from my teacher. And it's really sad, but that's kind of how it's been. And you know, if you want to, you need to have a good atmosphere in which people can learn in lessons. And okay, so everybody can find it difficult to see people moving at different paces and stuff, but these are all things that you need to work at, and if you follow this code of conduct, then, you know, and it all takes practice, but if you try and follow this code of conduct, then, you know, you can make these things a lot easier and create an atmosphere in which you can learn in classes. I mean, the other thing is, aside from anything I personally had, any trouble I personally had, you know, these people, they tend to have a bit of an attitude anyway. I can remember one student in particular who was very high ranking and seemed to think that just because they were high ranking, they shouldn't have to talk to any student who was below advanced level. Now, and that wasn't just me, that was across the board, and to be honest, that kind of thing doesn't help anyone. It's certainly, you know, it doesn't make anyone below advanced level feel comfortable. You know, it breeds discontent, and it just creates a bad atmosphere, and, you know, these things just shouldn't happen in lessons. Number 5. Brothers in Choy Lee Fut are not allowed to fight with each other. To distinguish a Choy Lee Fut practitioner, the action of the tiger claw is used. And on here, you are not to fight among your brothers of Choy Lee Fut, and to prevent this, when in times of trouble, we use the tiger claw action as a sign that we are Choy Lee Fut practitioners. Now, yeah, that's quite reasonable. I mean, it makes us look bad for a start, especially when people do it in a public forum and everybody can see. And you've got to wonder what you're actually going to gain from fighting each other. And to be honest, if you're fighting, there's normally some sort of power issue, and you know, there's probably very little to be gained from us fighting with each other, to be honest with you, even if you think it's necessary or something, if you think you've been slighted or whatever. Number 6. Choy Lee Fut practitioners shouldn't drink alcohol in excess and shouldn't eat meat in excess, since this can make a person disorientated, and as a result, mind and spirit become unclear, accidents may happen which could damage practitioner's body. And then on here, do not drink alcohol and eat meat in excessive amounts. Alcohol takes away one's sense of control, meat slows down the body. Therefore, the two taken excessively can damage your body and spirit. Now, I am a vegan, so excessive meat consumption is not a problem for me. I'm not someone who goes around saying everybody should not eat meat. I think that's a personal choice. I do think the thing with meat though is that it's hard to digest, so it stays in your stomach for quite a long time, a lot longer than other food, and that's why it makes you feel full. And you know, if something's a bit hard to digest and sticks around inside you for a long time, it probably is going to slow you down, to be honest with you. And alcohol, well, yeah, clearly you shouldn't be drinking too much alcohol, especially when you're practicing, unless you're doing like a drunken master form or something. One of the things I find interesting about this is that this is one of the few rules that is about the physical aspect of practice. Most of them, they're all about how you should behave and how you should use your skills or not use your skills for the vast majority of the time. So I find that one quite interesting. Number 7. Choy Lee Fut students are not allowed to teach other people outside the school, as it may attract trouble to themselves and others. The exception is if you deem a person to be of pure and gentle heart, then you may teach that person and pass your knowledge on. And then on here, when practicing Choy Lee Fut, do not show others your skills without consideration, as it may cause trouble to yourself and to others. If you judge a person to be of good nature, then you may pass on your knowledge. Now, when that rule was written, that was in repressive feudal China, and they really did have to be very careful about who they taught, because you could end up teaching the enemy, and then it would be much easier for them to fight you. You don't want that. And I mean, that's why they tended to keep it very strictly within the family, the martial arts skills days. And you know, you didn't want to give away your secrets either, because you didn't want them using them against you or spreading them around or anything. Now, the pure and gentle heart thing, See, now that's a bit of an awkward one, because someone who seems nice to start with can turn out to be quite manipulative and conniving and power hungry, and but you're not necessarily going to know that for quite a long time necessarily. You know, it could be years before you realise what they're like. You know, because something or other happens, and then and they behave a certain way. It's a very hard thing to judge. Also, I have a friend who was once in prison for violent assault. When he came out of prison, he spent 3 years learning karate intensively, and that was very good for him, because it meant that he learnt to control his anger and be just generally a lot more in control, and that means that it's helped him a lot with not re-offending, and he hasn't offended since. So under this, he might have been refused that kind of training, which could have helped him. So that's a very difficult judgment call, and you sort of don't know to start with what people are going to become. You know, you see a shy, quiet person, you might think, oh, they're all right to teach kung fu. Maybe they just need a bit of help. But once they get a bit of power and confidence, they might turn out to be rather awkward and difficult and worse. So that's a very difficult one to judge, and I also think it would be a shame to be too exclusive about it, because we don't really know the full benefits of martial arts practice and training. It's not like anyone's investigated it that much, because, I mean, for a start, drug companies aren't going to make any money out of it. Well, it's very unlikely. And you know, there's a lot of benefits that can be gained from it. You know, I mean, for me personally, for a start, I used to have a terrible sense of direction, and now I'm generally pretty good with my sense of direction. I don't get lost that much at all. And I'm pretty sure the reason for that is the forms learning. You know, it makes you very aware of where you are and where everything else is in relation to you. So I think that's why. But then you see, on the other hand, I find it a lot easier to understand people, because I'm actually very literal minded, and it can and most people don't speak in a very literal way. So I've tended to feel like I needed a translator throughout quite a lot of my life, but now I find it a lot easier to understand people on a day-to-day basis. So, I mean, I don't know why that is, but, you know, that's just two things I can think of, that I don't think people normally consider. There could be many others that we just don't know about, because nobody's really thought to look. So it would be a shame to keep it that exclusive, and I'm not entirely convinced that rule is totally relevant today. Number 8. Never misuse your skills on others, believing you are better than they are, as this only causes trouble. Do not fight or bully others to show that you are better than they are. And then here, never misuse your skills on others or put yourself above them, as it only causes trouble. Practice kung fu to build a strong foundation for your body. Practice every day and do not forsake its way. Now, the second part of that is just repetition of previous rules. But yeah, I mean, it is pretty basic, really. You really shouldn't do that, and you have to be pretty careful not to get a bit of an ego about your capabilities and stuff. So yeah, because it does cause trouble. It makes things very difficult. Yeah, and the other thing is, this is the third rule to mention bullying, which I find quite interesting, and I think it's really important that we get here that the man who created the style that we practice was very much against any form of bullying, and you really should always bear this in mind, and it applies to everyone. It doesn't matter how important, it doesn't matter how high ranking, it doesn't matter how many followers they have, they should not be bullying, and that includes teachers. I'm sure Heung just assumed that teachers wouldn't be bullying people, but the fact is they do. and sometimes they do it rather publicly, and it's a real shame. And so anyway, number 9. When using Kung Fu you have learnt, you are to think about how to remain humble and not be proud of your success, not placing yourself in front of others. If you misuse your knowledge to gain money, then you are within Choy Lee Fut family, a betrayer of our founder's wishes and bringing down the group's name. That one actually, it's not on here, and it's not on any other version of rules that I've seen. I do think it's a very important one, which is why I keep that while I'm reading it out. Yeah, trying to remain humble, not be too proud, is really quite important. Yeah, because you just cause trouble, and unfortunately it does happen a lot within Choy Lee Fut, and this is one of the reasons I think that we should really consider these rules a lot more, because I think that there would be far fewer problems. I'm quite amused by the fact that it says here, if you misuse your knowledge to gain money, then you are within Choy Lee Fut family, a betrayer of our founder's wishes. I'm pretty sure you're a betrayer of our founder's wishes, whichever rule you break, really. I think it's possible the person who wrote this is making a particular point. But anyway, it certainly is the case that practitioners do misuse it. It can be as simple as overcharging for uniform, or using your name to overcharge for seminars and lessons or whatever. That's really bad. It's not what martial arts is supposed to be about, or it's certainly not how Heung envisaged it, and I have to say I'm quite in agreement with him. And you do have to constantly think about what kind of person you are. As human beings, we're all works in progress until we die, and it's never a good idea to think that you have reached your pinnacle, because it's only downhill from there. And humans just aren't one level thing. They kind of go up and down and blah blah blah. So you really do have to constantly think about it. You don't have to really obsess, but you do want to make sure that you are not, because I've seen a lot of people who kind of don't even comprehend that they're abusing their power or their position or anything like that. So you do have to keep giving it thought, and including if you are a teacher. And the more high ranking you are, the more important it is to think about these things properly, because you are setting an example, and you have to think about how what your students are taking from you in the way that you behave, things that you do and things that you say. Number 10. If you cannot abide by these rules, then you may leave, or if you break them and dispute the rules, the master may expel you from the school. And then here, all of the above are rules the founder wishes us to follow, so to disobey these is to go against his wishes. If you cannot abide by these rules, you may leave, or if you break them, then it is up to your Sifu's discretion to assess your status within the school. That's fair enough. It's a it's a general house rule in quite a lot of martial arts schools, and yeah, I mean, if you're gonna, it's not saying if you break one rule then you have to leave. It is saying if your general, that is kind of implying that if your general code of conduct means that you keep breaking these rules, then and you are unable to, then you should leave. And I think that's absolutely fair enough, including if you are a teacher. And the higher ranking, the more important it is to keep these rules. Now, what really interests me is that the emphasis in these rules is on how to behave, how you use your skills, or preferably don't use them. There are some sort of CLF-based martial arts schools which don't make any particular claims about Heung or anything like that, that they have a mixture of rules that are kind of like this, and stuff about practice, the more physical aspect of martial arts, and specific stuff about how to behave in their schools and stuff, and that's all fair enough. It's very unfortunate. There are a number of Choy Lee Fut schools that have rules that are really only concentrating on the physical aspect of martial arts, and these are often fine as far as they go. Yeah, you do need stable footwork. Good nutrition is quite important, and you need these things to keep to keep healthy and fit and practice well and so on. But you need a code of conduct as well. You need a guide. And if you have rules that are really just about how to be a good fighter, then what have you got? You've got a good fighter with no moral compass or no moral guide, or very little moral guide except for what they give themselves. And I think that's really worrying. And you've got to wonder about the ethos of someone who promotes rules that are really just about the physical aspect of martial arts, because if you're just talking about the physical side, then you've got power that is unchecked, and power that is unchecked becomes a monster. Now, as I said, these rules have been kept really rather quiet, and I think we've all lost out by it a lot. There's it means that it's been a lot harder to keep. You want people to behave well and to use their skills reasonably, and I think it's made it's made martial arts quite cliquey and bitter, and there's been a lot of infighting. I mean, I can't talk about martial arts in general. I only really know about Choy Lee Fut, but it means that it's made us less open to the wider public, and they are losing out because they don't get to learn things that can help them. So I really feel that if we were to consider these rules properly, and I'm not saying we should follow everyone to the letter by any means, but these should be given a lot more consideration in the world of Choy Lee Fut and probably beyond. But I think we'll start with Choy Lee Fut really, because we would be able to do, and Choy Lee Fut would be able to do a lot more for people in the world, and for us, if we considered these rules properly.